All right. I had to put these headphones on. All right. What's going on, family? Peace and shalom. Peace and shalom. It's your brother Divine Prospect, Kingdom Harbinger Ministries back in the building. What's going on, y'all, for another Freestyle Friday? Y'all let me know what's goody. All right. Let me know what's goody. Go ahead and throw this banner on like we normally do. All right. So today, again, I was trying to arrange a conversation with some other individuals, one from Clubhouse, one still do email correspondence, and one other. And it looks like none of them are showing up. And I've been communicating with them for the past week. I don't know what's going on. Maybe they don't want to show up for the conversation or whatever the case may be. It's all good if they don't want to show up. They just don't want to show up, right? However, I put out a APB for the brother Akpalau to see if he wanted to join this discussion so we could transition and discuss the calendar, since I know the feast days are ramping up. Some people already is starting their feast days, which is kind of wild. I don't know what that's about. Some people already have their first day of the year already beginning. You know what I'm saying? We at KHM, our first day of the year don't begin until the evening of April 12th when that full moon comes in after the equinox. And then that following day, which is the day portion, is begins day one, right? So that evening and day does begin day one, but I normally just focus on the day portion because it's easy to count those days to get to Passover and then eventually unleavened bread, all right? But as we know that there is a plethora of different calendars going around in our community, I'm gonna put this challenge out before, like I've done in the past. If anybody currently who's watching this in the audience, or if anybody's watching this after the live recording, or if you know anybody that's teaching a calendar, which is opposite of what we teach here at KHM, which is going to be the majority of the community, let them know that I'm available for a conversation. Let's talk about the calendar. Also, if you go on this channel, there's a playlist that deals specifically with the calendars and those calendar type discussions. I've had plenty of them over the years. I put out the current model that we're currently following. I put that out back in 2016. I did a 7-hour, 40-minute something lecture, and that was the abridged version, going in with all the material I had in regards to how we reconstructed the calendar, how we looked at other calendrical systems, and how we determined what we reconstructed is actually what best represents the ancient Pre-Exilic Israelite culture. Okay, more specifically, the sacerdotal menological model. Sacerdotal means priestly, menological meaning the rendering or reckoning of time via months, and model because it is something that was created and it's a type for everything else to follow after, right? We've also shown over time via captivity how we've adopted additional calendars that would include anybody that's using a conjunction moon or first visible crescent in order to determine their months or the beginning of the year. Anybody that's using the what we call the Enochian calendar or the calendrical text from Qumran. All right, I got a book on that I'm going to share in a second if the brother comes on for us to discuss it. What else? And all those who use the Hillel II calendar, we addressed that in our lecture as well. And then there's a lot of different other variations that's out there, like a ton of them, right? So I'm willing to dive into all of them, right? So I'm just ready for whoever wants to have the discussion. This is 2025, and this conversation still comes up, and it will never go away until Yah gathers us all. And then when he gathers us all, then he's going to reveal to us what's the best reckoning of time, because we have 1,000 years after he pulls us out of captivity from the four corners, puts us in the wilderness so he can get to know us better, purge out the rebels, and take the rest of 2/3 into the land with him to come down and reign with Yeshua Bar Yosef, or the Son of Man, and establish his rule and reign for about 1,000 years, according to what we see in Revelation chapter 19 and 20, right? So everything that's in the Tanakh for the Nevi'im and other prophets dealing with eschatology, including Daniel 7 to 10, etc. Most of that, some of it has been fulfilled, and some of it has yet to still be fulfilled, as we see in Daniel chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, in regards to the final resurrection. All of these things that we see in Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel about the end times will be fulfilled during that period of time when, after we are removed out of the land, our Exodus, our second Exodus, and Yah puts us in a wilderness situation, all of Israel, because they would have an opportunity to be saved, even if they're not doing so now. The ones who are doing so now, Yah has rewards for us in the kingdom. And we'll be the first fruit to be obedient, right? And then once he deals with them in there to try and allure us back unto him, There's going to be some rebels in there. Those are going to resist within Israel, still stiff-necked, hard-headed. That's why it's best to get it right now, so you have a better opportunity when that time comes. And then he's going to purge those rebels, and he's going to take the remnant back with him into the land. But before they get to the land, we see there's a marriage supper with the Lamb. That marriage supper is going to commence, as we see in Revelation chapter 19. And then from there, we're coming back down with the one Yah has chosen to represent him as his agent in the earth, to rule and reign in the earth at that time. And then you have that 1,000-year period where all the remaining prophecies from the Tanakh is fulfilled during that time period before the final battle of Gog and Magog, which is mentioned in scripture in the book of Revelation, chapter 20. So Revelation chapter 19 speaks about Armageddon, and then we have Revelation 20 that discusses about Gog and Magog, and then Revelation chapter 21 goes into when the New Jerusalem comes down from Shemayim and is being sent from, like, a gift given from the groom to the bride. And we're going to be living there for eternity. It's going to be 12 gates for the 12 tribes of Israel. And any Gentiles who have clung unto Israel during this time before the Exodus, they will be brought into the kingdom during that 1,000-year reign. They will be serving Israel, and we will be ruling righteously according to Torah. And then after that time period has commenced in the final battle of Gog and Magog, when the resurrection occurs, that last resurrection occurs, and the dead are judged, at that point, any Gentile that is cleaving unto Yah, any Gentile that was a proselyte, that is circumcised and put themselves under the covenant of Moshe, which is technically the covenant of Yah. Moshe is just the agent that's officiating that covenant. According to Deuteronomy chapter 29 and verse 10, the strangers amongst Israel can also enter into the covenant. Those individuals as well will be counted as Israel, and depending on what tribes they cleaved unto and or the ones who are allied with us that cleave unto Israel, they will be brought into the kingdom. They will serve Israel within that time period. And then after the destruction of, Hashatan and, the adversaries, earthly adversaries, and that final resurrection, the gift for those individuals that cleaved unto Israel is that they will go into the gates along with the tribe in which they cleaved unto, right? And that's how it works, right? That's even what I told Christians. I say, y'all already cleaving to an Israelite. I don't know what's the big issue. You cleave to Yeshua, Bar Yosef, or who you call Jesus Christ. You're cleaving unto an Israelite. So if he so wills and you are obedient to his commandments, he's going to bring you through the gate of Judah. That's the gate you're going to come into because you cleaved unto someone from the house of Judah. And you decided to set up shop within the house of Judah. All right. So I'm still waiting on this brother to join in. I'm not sure what's going on. Again, I put a couple of invites out. I really want to discuss it with Akpala. We began our discussion, I believe, last week in regards to this subject matter, and I just want to see if you want to continue it. And then also put the AP out for 2 other individuals to join as well. If they're willing to join, if they can join, I have no clue. Haven't heard back from them. So sorry about that. I mean, I don't know what's going on with these guys. The only one that's been consistent is Akpala. So I don't know. Who knows, right? So anyway, with that being said, the key thing at the end of the day, I'm going to show you this real quick in the event that I'm unable to get into them. I'm going to show you the myriad of sources that I've went through, and it's going to give you an example of some of them, and trying to understand calendars and antiquity, especially during the pre-exilic, the ancient pre-exilic Israelite period. And then all the sister cultures, their calendars, and the concept of reckoning time, absolute dating, relative dating, and looking at different calendars. Like you have an almanac that deals with the civil calendar, then you have the regal calendars, you have priestly calendars, et cetera, et cetera. So all of this stuff is very important to note. If you do have time, I would recommend you binge read all these books that I'm about to show you, because all these books go into detail in regards to calendrical systems. Some of the sources that I used when I wrote my paper in regards to the reconstructed ancient pre-exilic Israelite calendar. And I use these as sources for it as well, right? And it also highlights some of the discrepancies that we face when we look at the other calendrical systems, especially when we're using the Tanakh as the guide to measure against these calendars that people are just loosely following and doing whatever they want to do with it, right? But again, I commend all of Israel, anybody that's out there that strives to keep these commandments and strives to keep these set apart days. Even if we disagree on it, I commend you for making an attempt to keep it and to be obedient, right? Because that's what Yah's looking for. Not the fact that you're circumcised and you're from the lineage of Abraham, more particularly Yaakov, and more particularly the 12 tribes of Israel, but the fact that you keep his commandments. because you could be a circumcised ethnic Jew and Israelite and still get destroyed along with the rest of the Gentile nations. That's not going to save you alone. That just gives you more responsibility, more obligation, right? To keep the commandments, to keep his word, to keep Torah, to follow after the last Nabi that he has sent, Yeshua Bar Yosef, right? The onus is on us if we're Israelites and we identify as Jews to be at the forefront of keeping these commandments, to set an example to all the nations of what real righteousness looks like. All right, so oh yeah, Sean McGee's been here for some time. That's a throwback, brother. What's going on, Sean? Pray all is well. Congratulations. I heard that you had a new member to your household, so congratulations on that, brother. Hopefully you were able to get him circumcised on the 8th day. But if you ever need a Brit Milah, let me know and we can set it up, brother. I'll be more than happy to do it for you. Not sure if it's a boy or girl, so correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's a boy, then let me know. I'm prepared to assist in any way that I can. All right. All right. So I don't know what's going on. So what I'm going to do, again, while we wait for Akpalau, again, we don't have all day or all night. I'm really here for a limited period of time. Y'all know, because my family comes in and I try to be present with them when my kids get home from school. I'm going to, let me see if this makes a difference. I don't know if that light is any better or not. I don't even think it matters. It's all good. What I'm going to do, let me show off the sources for you real quick. And if you're interested in getting any of these sources, reading any of these sources, sign up for the Patreon, www.patreon.com/DivineProspect. That's a repository of a wealth of research, information, and sources that I am putting together so that the community can access. The good thing about the Patreon model is that it keeps a lot of the trolls from interrupting and disrupting the information or the resources that's coming out. On there, we have a plethora of books, scholarly articles. We have language courses on there. I have my academic blogs on there. We have an audio Bible on there. The Experience Bible that's used, that's actually recorded Black actors and actresses to do the voices of the characters and so forth in scripture. And then we have other sources on there where I have videos, one that transverses through the land of Israel and teaches you what different things are, like what a cistern is, what a spring is, what a valley looks like, what a plateau, what a mountain is, and different, sites that was mentioned in scripture, where they're situated at and why they're in certain locations in the land. We got that video on there as well. And a ton of other resources on there, right? So these books I'm about to show you is on there as well. You can just search and look for them up on the Patreon and you can get access to it. So sign up for the Patreon now if you have not already. All right, so let me go ahead and share this with you real quick so you can see what we're working with. And then before we begin, I got one announcement to make. Well, two announcements. First one is the calendar is coming really, really soon. We're wrapping up on it. We're almost done. It's a few minor changes that need to be made to it, and then it'll be out for release. So the 2025 KHM, I would say Ancient Pre-Exilic Israelite Calendar will be available soon, right? And the second one is a need in the community for brothers that are good with doing handiwork to help out the widows in the community as prescribed by Torah, right? So here are the books. We're going to start first with, There we go. All right. Start first with the books. The first book I'm going to go to is this one here. This is my favorite book in regards to the calendar. It's called Calendrical Variations in Second Temple Judaism, New Perspectives on the Date of the Last Supper Debate by Stephanie Saulnier, right? Brill Publishing, part of the supplements to the Journal for the Study of Judaism, right? Excellent read. This is my staple source in regards to the calendar, because it goes through all the calendars, right? That most Israelites use today. And I think some other Israelites try to get innovative and they have a parent calendrical model and they just borrow from it and modify it as they see fit. Another book is Calendars in Antiquity, Empires, States, and Societies by Sacha Stern. So Sacha Stern is one of the best authors as it pertains to calendars and calendrical systems in the ancient Near East. This is from Oxford Publishing. We also have this one right here, Calendar and Chronology, Jewish and Christian, Biblical, Intertestamental, and Patristic Studies by Roger T. Beckwith in regards to the calendar and the reckoning of time amongst the Jewish and Christian community. That's what I have it listed labeled as. Excuse me. This one is Living the Lunar Calendar, because there's some people out there that says, oh, we should be following the lunar calendar. If you want to know more detail about what that is at a scholarly level, to know how to then communicate that information to those who are following this model, get this book. It's called Living the Lunar Calendar, edited by Jonathan Ben-Dov, Wayne Horowitz, and John M. Steele. All right. We have another one right here. I don't know why that's zoomed in. It's called Calendar and Community, a history of the Jewish calendar from the 2nd century BCE to the 10th century CE. So you can see the development of this calendrical system over time, right? A lot of people are not familiar with that wide range of history. This is about 1,200 years of history in regards to the calendar and how it morphs over time and so forth. This book covers that, right? Again, from Oxford Publishing, and the author is, again, Sacher Stern, right? And then we have this one right here, which is one of the sources I want to use in discussing the conversation about the calendar model with my brother Ak Palau. This is called Calendrical and Sapiential Texts, edited by Donald W. Parry and Emmanuel Tove. And this is from the Dead Sea Scrolls Reader series, right? Great series. There's other books in this series. Again, excellent read. As you know, Emmanuel Tove is one of my favorite scholarly authors as it pertains to textual criticism. And he does a lot of that work here and parsing out a lot of the calendrical texts found at Qumran. And when I tell a lot of people that follow the Enochian model of reckoning time and they derive calendrical systems from that model, is that there were several sects in Qumran that attempted to model an actual calendar off of the Enochian calendrical text. And the problem was they've abandoned it. Several sects have come along, created a calendrical actual calendar from that Enochian model, and over time saw that it's very difficult to sustain, and they abandoned it. Remember, the calendar was very important for those people because they're not in Jerusalem. They're not consulting with the priesthood in Jerusalem, with the various sects that came up, the Pharisees and Sadducees. They're off grid in regards to Jerusalem. They're in seclusion. So they've developed a calendrical model based on this Enochian text, right? Just the calendrical text within the book of Enoch, not the entire book of Enoch, just those. And in creating this, they had to use a calendar so that way they can assign roles to different people in the community to do different things for the same year, same time each year. And that model of calendar only has 364 days. And the difficulty with that is that you go behind a day and a quarter, right? So every year you're a day and a quarter behind. So after 7 years, you're a week behind, right? After 14 years, you're 14 plus days behind, almost 15 days behind. And then if you keep going and keep going, you'll wind up being a month, 2 months, 3 months behind. So that way, the feast day that you're keeping, let's say it's unleavened bread or first fruits, you'll be keeping that instead of the spring in the winter time, like some people are not right now. some people going to have Passover in the winter time during the wintry rain season, which the text says in the book of the Song of Solomon's, spring is only here after the rainy season has passed. We're going to get into that if it necessitates during our conversation. So that's the problem that I have with that model. The another problem I have with this first visible crescent, this conjunction mood model, is that, guess what? The text gives you no prescription and or instructions for intercalation. Add in additional days to ensure that you're having the feast days within the proper season, because that season is dictated by the harvest that's given, because that harvest, once you reap it, you have to give elements of that harvest to these feasts, to the priests at these feasts. We're going to get into that when we look in Leviticus chapter 23, Deuteronomy chapter 16. We'll go into more detail about it. Another good article on this to read is A Short History of the Jewish Fixed Calendar, The Origin of the Molad by J. Gene Adler, right? Very, very good article. Again, it's on the Patreon. You can check it out within my library. Very good article to kind of show you what the current calendrical model is that's used by the Jews or the Jewish community today. And I conclude why I reject it. Right, because a lot of how we got this current calendar that the Jewish community uses cannot be found in the ancient Pre-Exilic Israelite period. I'm talking about during the Iron Age period. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and stop that. All right. Appreciate that, Smoke. Reloaded for the donation. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right. So Smoke, you had a great question. Let me jump on your question real quick. So did the original Hebrew calendar have 13 months? No. So not only do we use the text as the primary foundation to establish the proper calendrical model that the ancient Pre-Exilic Israelites had followed, we also look at archaeological artifacts to help to situate and or corroborate what we find in scripture. One of those examples is the Gezer calendar. The Gezer calendar was found situated during the time period in which the Israelites was in the land. And this particular calendar showcases 12 months. Some scholars believe that it was a schoolboy's exercise for the farmer's almanac, which existed at that time, meaning that they were able to calculate the months. They have a menological system that calculates the months based on the harvest periods. And when you take that text, that archaeological artifact, that text, and you align it with scripture, it helps to situate that those 12-month period falls within the times and the periods in which scripture says that certain harvests had to be added and certain crops had to be given in regards to the feast days. Right. So we know for the civil calendar, the one that typically the agriculturalists use, there were 12 months, and those months were determined based on the harvest. So that is the foundation from which the priestly calendar is created and derived, because priestly calendar was designed to lay on top of the civil calendar, because the feast days have to align with those crop seasons. All right. That's very important. So that 13-month system did not originate with Israel before exile. That system comes from Mesopotamia, and the Israelites adopted it when they went into Babylonian captivity. In Babylon, the Chaldean priests were responsible for giving counsel to the king, so that whenever they were behind time, because they're using a fully lunar calendar, that means after every 2 years, you start to sway some time. You're 11 days and a quarter off. So after 2 years, you're 22 days or 22 days or 23 days off. And then after that third year, you're going to be a whole season behind. You know what I'm saying? So what they have to do is they say, look, we have to create an additional month called Adar 2 and add that additional month, so that way we can keep our feast days within in alignment with the seasons. Their main feast day in Babylon was the Akitu festival, right? Which is a seasonal festival where the people would go through a procession, a coronation procession, in regards to the king, to reestablish his reign and rule that he received by his divine right to rule by the gods. More particularly in Babylon, it was Marduk, right? So that's not originally Israelite at all. Another concern is when we look at the book of Enoch. The interesting thing about the book of Enoch is the book of Enoch, as we have it today, comes from either the Ethiopian or the Slavonic versions, right? What we have from the Dead Sea Scrolls are just all fragments. We do not have a fully extant version of Enoch from the Dead Sea Scrolls. So that's very important to know. So if you're reading the book of Enoch and you hold to the book of Enoch, it comes from the Ethiopic version, from the Ethiopic Bible, or it comes from the Slavonic version, right? So there's two versions. Actually, there's really three manuscripts that make it up, but two versions in particular that actually deal with, or source from what we currently use today, right? So that's another issue. Now, there's some brothers that say, oh, we got to follow the book of Jubilees. And I tell them, book of Jubilees is Midrash. Midrash is commentary. Book of Jubilees is commentary. It gives commentary and insight behind Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 up to Exodus chapter 15, forgot what verse, but it gives commentary on all that history there. And the author states that the purpose of doing this commentary is to showcase the proper Jubilee times, to reestablish the seasons and the times according to how Yah initially intended for it to be, because it was being corrupted by means of captivity. So we see that Jubilees is a result of Grecian captivity. Jubilees does not go back further than that. It does not. And we can look into that when we go into the language, the style, and so forth, and compare it with the writings from the Iron Age. So that's something that was developed during the Grecian captivity. right? That's very important to note in regards to the book of Jubilee. The book of Jubilees and the book of Enoch, which I mentioned to you. Now, in the book of Enoch, there are some archaisms in the book of Enoch, right? One of them being the reckoning of the moon. So in Enoch typically de-emphasizes the moon and stars, and it puts heavy emphasis on the sun. And the reason for that is because it is an apologetic against the polemic calendar of the day, which the Macedonians established to be their general calendar, which was adopted from the Chaldean calendar, which is a lunar calendar, meaning that they de-emphasized the sun and they emphasize the moon. So what Enoch is doing is doing the opposite. It's emphasizing the sun and de-emphasizing the moon. However, in there are two reckonings in time as it pertains to the moon. There's a waxing moon in there that it talks about, the moon waxing. That means it goes from dark to light, and the moon waning, going from light to dark. It has two, and again, one of those books that I showed you, the calendar variations in Second Temple Judaism, it actually goes into detail and it explains this exactly to you. It's very important to understand that. So we have two systems in regards to the moons and the reckoning of time using the moons in the book of Enoch, and the one in which the moon is waning, that is believed to be the archaism, the older version of it. All right. Hold on 1 second. I got to step away for 1 second, family. 1 second. Okay, sorry for that brief intermission. I had some team come by and get rid of all this extra junk that I have in my garage. So let's transition back to where we was at. Okay, let's see. All right. So Apothecary Custom says, glad you touching on this, fam. Can you explain why KHM is keeping Passover in April as opposed to March, since the spring equinox is in March? Is it due to barley or the turtle doves? Great question. So the reason why we're keeping Passover in April is because the beginning of the year, according to the model that we subscribe to, is the first full moon after the equinox. So April 12th, that evening, the first full moon is there. And then the next day, then a daylight portion will indicate the beginning of the year. Now, also, we try to model our calendar off of what's called the pink moon. Look up the pink moon. Matter of fact, go to the Patreon. I did a whole academic blog on the pink moon. And then the harvest moon brings in the fall feast. So the pink moon brings in the spring feast, and the harvest moon brings in the fall feast. Okay. So we reckon that because from the sources that we've seen, the calendar for Israel historically over time, like even that book I showed you for 1,200 years, historical over time, is always reckoned after the equinox, right? So this is a tradition that's been coming all the way down. Now, we don't have that specifically in scripture, but we do have in scriptures like what you just mentioned, will be the barley harvest first, and then the wheat harvest that catches up after the barley harvest. And this is based off the wild variant of barley and the wild variant of wheat. One important thing to note in scripture, I'm gonna bring it up right now. It looks like we're not gonna have nobody join us on today, and that's fine. I'm going to bring something up for you in Exodus. Okay, let me show you something in Exodus. And again, you're correct. It is also in alignment with the harvest. Okay, so let me get this for you real quick. This is Exodus chapter 10, and starting at verse, let me see, where is it at? Let me do that. Oh, 9. I'm saying 10. I'm going to go to Exodus chapter 9. Sorry about that. Verse 31. That's what I meant to go. Exodus 9 and 31. All right. Let me share my screen. Oh, this is really, really good. Present it right here. All right. Hopefully everybody can see it clearly. Let me take this comment away. All right. So it says, then Yah said to Moshe, stretch out your hand towards heaven so that there may be hail in all the land of Egypt on man and beast and on every plant of the field in the land of Egypt. Then Moses stretched out his staff towards heaven, and Yah sent thunder and hail, and fire ran down to the earth. And Yah rained hail upon the land of Egypt. There was hail and fire flashing continually in the midst of the hail, very heavy hail, such as had never been in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. The hail struck down everything that was in the field and all the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and the hail struck down every plant of the field and broke every tree of the field. Only in the land of Goshen, where the people of Israel were, there was no hail, right? Now let's continue going, right? I'm going to jump here to verse 29. Moses said to him, as soon as I have gone out of the city, I will stretch out my hands to Yah. The thunder will cease, and there will be no more hail, so that you may know that the earth is Yah's. But as for you and your servants, I know that you do not yet fear Yah. Verse 31, the flax and the barley was struck down, for the barley was in the ear of Eve, and the flax was in the bud. But the wheat and the emmer were not struck down, for they are late in coming up. So when this happens right before they leave out of Egypt. The barley harvest is already in effect, and this is the wild barley that's in Egypt, which correlates with the wild barley that we'll see in the land of Israel, right? When they get into the land. Right now, why is this important? Because when we go here to Exodus chapter 13, and we're going to start at verse 3. Then Moshe said to the people, remember this day in which you came out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, for by a strong hand Yah brought you out of this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten. Today, in the month of Abib, you are going out. So they're leaving out in the month of Abib, in which the barley is already ready to harvest and the wheat is still budding. You understand? So we have 4 crops that we can use to situate the period of time, which means if you're keeping the feast days and the barley ain't ready to be ripened, ain't ripened, ready to be harvested, then you're not doing it according to scripture. So some people take attacks at the Torah that we have today and say, oh, the scribes wrote stuff in there and the scribes messed up Torah and all of that. That's what they'll say to you, because they can't reconcile what the scripture says according to the calendrical model in which they're following. So you have to keep that in mind. This is what's going on here, right? And again, they have to make bread from out of this, what we would call barley, right? Sometimes known by other names scientifically, but out of barley, this is what they have to make their bread out of. And the reason for that is because the wheat is not yet ripe enough for it. Now, during this time, at least during this time, Other times you may have a late reckoning of time in which you may have the early harvest of wheat that you can make unleavened bread out of, right? But if we're going to do it according to the scripture, the barley typically is what's used in regards to that. Not just the barley and the flax, but the wheat and emmer are not struck down. So you have two witnesses of two crops that have to grow on the precipice of the actual feast day beginning. So before you get Passover, you have to have some barley, or in addition to that, an early wheat harvest. Now, if you having this in early March and February, which some people's calendars are regressing, then guess what? You're not doing it according to scripture. This is very important because it helps us to triangulate with what I call the terrestrial signs. The terrestrial signs is the harvest, it's the animals mating and their migration, and it's the weather. All three of those things are what we call the terrestrial signs. Then the celestial signs is the sun, moon, and stars. All of these things have to be in sync in order to determine what time it is. And like I said, we measure the beginning of our season by means of the pink moon. The pink moon is always the full moon after the equinox. That is an earthly sign that Yah has given. So that way, if you're not in society, you're off grid and you want to know, oh, what season are we in? Are we in spring? Are we in fall? Look for the biggest moon, what they call the super moon. And that super moon is going to be that pink moon. It's going to look pinkish. And that will indicate for you that, oh, this is the beginning of the year. It's amazing what Yah has done to help us to remember these feast days, right? So hopefully that begins to answer your question, brother. All right. All right. All right. Good question. All right. So it says, what's the reason you don't use the calendar that Yeshua would have used when he lived? Now, the issue with that is that the calendrical system that he was using, again, that's why that book that I showed you, it goes into that because it discusses the calendrical system at the time of Passover in the 1st century CE, in which Yeshua lived right before he was crucified. So the reason why we don't use that, because by the time we get to then, they're using the Julian calendar in the Roman Empire. They're using they're using the Julian calendar. That is what they have adopted for their calendrical system. And remember, prior to the Julian calendar, prior to the Grecian rule, the Israelites was 70 years in Babylon. The Israelites had adopted the calendrical system of the Babylonians. How do we know that? When we go to the archives of the Marushu tablets, the Al Yehudu tablets, all these tablets show the Jews that are in captivity. And when they're doing these contracts and other things, right, they're actually using the reckoning of time in the land that they were exiled to. So now they're taking their original calendar mutates while they're in Babylonian captivity. Then they leave out of there and they're in Persian captivity. So further mutations occur under Cyrus and then his successors. And then it mutates again by the time they go through the Grecian time, where they lose a lot of this information because their texts are destroyed, etc. Right? And then when they're able to restore it during their autonomy, when the Hasmonean period is established, now we get to the 1st century, in which there's another calendrical change by means of the Romans. And now they're adopting a mutated calendrical model onto the Roman model. How do we know that? Well, when Yeshua says, are there not 12 hours in a day? That 12-hour, that absolute reckoning of time of 12 hours only works in an absolute calendar, which the Julian calendar was. An absolute calendar is a fixed calendar that's created, that does not change irregardless of what's happening in nature. That is not what the Israelites used in the Iron Age period. Everything they were doing was based on relative dating, meaning that they counted time or reckoned time based on natural events that are happening in the land, as well as regal events that's happening via the political regime in power at the time. All right. All right. Hopefully that answers your question, right? That's why we don't use it. However, I will say this: there's still remnants of the calendrical model that we follow that's found in the 1st century as well. Hence, when you go into that book, it goes into detail about it. But that's why we don't do that. We could take a look at when Passover was used, and this is from my research. that when Passover happened at that time, the way Passover was set up, it was set up a particular way at that time when it was keeping Passover that would have aligned very coincidentally enough with the model that we currently use. Right. Hold on 1 second. I got to do one more pause and I'll be right back. All right. I had to rush out and everything. I'm good though. I'm back. Should be good now. All right. So they followed an Israelite calendar that was imposed on top of the civil calendar of the empire at the time, and that was the Julian calendar. Just like today, when you look at our calendar, the ancient Pre-Exilic Israelite sacerdotal menological model is imposed on top of the current civil calendar that we use, which is the Gregorian calendar, right? So that's pretty much what they did. All right. But the key thing is to go back to the ancient ways. That's the key thing, as much as we possibly can. All right. Because again, it was affected based on captivity. Yeshua was dealing his people based on captivity because he was in captivity along with them. Right. Now that may sound crazy. Some Christians, oh, what do you mean Jesus was in captivity? Yes, he was a Jew in captivity. That's the circumstances he was born in. I didn't make those rules. That's just what it is. All right, so let me see. Hold on, let me do this. The next full moon is on March 14th. Yes, March 14th is before the March, or we call the vernal equinox. So we're not dealing with no full moons before the vernal equinox. It's the full moon after the vernal equinox. So those dates would not apply. Okay. All right. That's it. You got it. And guess what? You would not have a feast of unleavened bread because there'd be no bread. Now, I'll say this. There may have been a repository, right, where they had storage silos that may have had grain in it. And this is typically how a lot of cultures in the ancient Near East would have survived over a wintry season, right? So they would keep grains in the storehouse and they were relegated to much activity indoors when the wintry, rainy season or the winter season is there, right? However, because the text is talking about the wild variant and not that which is stored, right? They would have to have waited until the actual harvest before they can leave out. And remember, they had to do this in haste. So they had to gather this in haste and they had to make it in haste because right after they had this feast of unleavened bread, the evening of Passover, right? They had to leave out, right? So that's a great observation. Great observation, brother. Great observation. All right. My brother Dot in the building, Mr. Jeshron 145 in the building. What's going on? Shout out to I'm just gonna give a roll call now. Roll call now. And again, if you know anybody that teaches something other than this for a calendrical system, or if you have a plethora of different questions, I'm more than happy to answer them for you. I'm probably just gonna drop a link in the chat if somebody wants to come on that actually has a different perspective in regards to the calendar, and I would love to have a dialogue with you. Or you can invite someone that you know, Moray, a teacher, whoever you know that teaches something opposite than this, and we'd love to have a conversation with them if they are available at this time. Maybe a couple of shout out to Dita Star Loves Yah, Shalom, Damon Williamson, Shalom, Lin, Shalom, Get Wise, Shalom, Nazarene Essene TV, Shalom, Karima Poet, Shalom, DB, Shalom, Ice U Cole, Shalom, Coca Orange, Shalom, Sue, Shalom. Hey, we'll be in Toronto this year. All praise to the Most High for that. Sue, Shalom, Yasha, Shalom. He says, Abib hasn't even happened yet in the land. I know that. But people are still, they already started their year already. Yo, it's wild. It's wild. What is it? It's only March 7th and some people began their new year already. That's crazy. All right, let's keep going. Shout out to Brandon Blackwell. Shalom. Brother says, I keep the first slither of light after the equinox. Looks like Enoch aligns to that as well. So Brandon, that is like the typical model that's followed today in regards to the first sliver of life, or FVC. I don't subscribe to that, and we can definitely have a conversation about that. Anybody who knows about that. But I see you said here, I believe Enoch shows that the moon is full after 14 days into the month. Interested to see why you use full moon as new moon and what sources I can check out. Excellent question. So remember that source I mentioned to you? Let me see if I can pull it up off of memory. It's been a while. I think it's been like 3 years since I last read it. Oh, I just saw something. Hey, before I go through the rest of the roll call, I must pause here and give this shout out right here. Brother Moshe reached out to me, so I need to share this. Right here. All right. So this right here is a flyer that he gave to me. And this is in regards to Israelite men servicing and assisting widows within our community. It says apply today. Widows who need home repairs, let us help. It says invitation for widows and single mothers in need of home repairs. All repairs done during Juneteenth week with little to no cost. The application deadline is April 15th. Home repair project is from June 18th to June 22nd, 2025. And they can go to www.letsgobuild.org, right? For inquiries, 227-225-7562. Isaiah chapter 1, verse 17 says, learn to do good, seek justice, rebuke the oppressor, defend the fatherless, and plead for the widow. His brother is working with an awesome team, and he's trying to recruit brothers who want to assist the widows and single mothers within our community that may need construction and home repairs. And if you are a widow or a single mother that needs that type of assistance, then you want to call this number here and make sure you apply at www.letsgobuild.org before April 15th. And they will come out if they make the decision based on where the requests are coming from during the week of June 18th to June 22nd to actually do those renovations and or home repairs, right? So if you got a leaky roof or you got some plumbing issues or something else like that, brothers are willing to come in and do the work for you, okay? So I wanted to make sure I shared that. And also, this is the flyer for the volunteers, the men that do want to volunteer and give their time to this. Right? Join us in making a difference. For volunteers and donations, call for the skilled Hebrew tradesmen, cooks, and general volunteers to participate in repairing a home for widows or persons in need. The project date is June 18th to June 22nd, 2025, and the donation deadline is May 30th, 2025. Again, the website is www.letsgobuild.org, and the increase is from 227-225-7562 if you need to call and speak with someone in regards to it. Okay, so this is a really excellent project that I really believe in, and this is actually Torah in application, so that we're not debating and teaching ad infinitum on YouTube, on social media, that we're actually hands-on in the community doing what Yah told us to do, for us to seek the cause and assist the oppressed, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. So all praises to that brother and his team, and any of y'all that want to join him to give your time to do this work that Yah calls us to do physically in the community. If you ever felt that you have you're really good with your hands and you're a tradesman and you want to get some work done, this is the best opportunity to do it. All right. So I just want to take time out because that's very important and not want to forget it. And then we can resume to our regularly scheduled program. Okay. All right. So let me go back to where I was. Let me finish doing the shout outs. All right. So shout out to, and I think I was addressing what you said here. And like I said, I'll bring it up in that source. Let me finish the shout outs real quick. Shout out to Taki Rika Styles, Sean McGee, Shalom, Yasha Yah, Shalom, the Most High School of Wisdom, Shalom. Let me see. M. Brown, Yaakov, Randall Hall II, Apothecary Custom, Smoke Reloaded, Israelite Defense, One Servant, Yahosef Ben Yisrael, Shalom King, Shabbat Shalom. Let me see, who else? Nazarene Hebrew Institute of Technology, J Showtime TV, Shalom. T Rainbow, Shalom. Daniel Ben Kochani, Shalom. Eli Madkin, Shalom. William Love, Shalom. Let's see, who else we got here? You Love Yah, Shalom. And I think that's it. All right. Yeah. So helping with construction. And they also mentioned cooks as well. If you're handy with your hands and you want to go and help the widows and the single mothers in our community with other Israelites of like-minded, other Israelite men of like-minded to go and actually do the work, then you can call and assist with that, right? They'll give you all the details when you call in or when you go on the website. All right. Shout out to Judah Israel. Shalom. All right, so I think I covered everybody that's in here for now. So what I'm going to do is this. Shout out to Messenger of Emmanuel. I think I might have missed you. I think I got everybody here. Okay. All right, so this is what I'll do. I'm going to share the link. All right. And what I'll also ask is, if you do follow a different calendar than we do here at KHM, that's fine. I'm okay with that. I would like you to share the details of that right now if you're willing to do so. Okay. So that's what the link is there. You can click on that link and we can address it. Hey, Brother Divine, you might have missed my question, but can you give me your answer on that? Well, I'll go back and look for it. But remember, other people are asking questions as well, so I'm not purposely overlooking your question. I'm actually looking for the other people that are also sharing questions as well. All right. Shout out to AJ Bethea. Shalom. So the link is there if anybody wants to click and join in. If you are keeping a different calendar, I would like to discuss it. I think Brandon, that's a good question. Yes, I do. So we pretty much don't do any work, any civil work. I keep any kind of errands very minimal, right? Try not to run any errands on that day, but if we have to run an errand, then we have to run an errand. So we typically take that time to rest, relax, ponder on Yah, pray, and then we'll do our lesson before twilight hits of the evening that's coming in. And that's typically what we do. Sometimes we'll go and congregate with other families and so forth and do the same thing. But that's typically what we do. It's pretty laid back. It's not nothing that's strenuous or requires a lot of work or effort. We try to minimize the amount of cooking, preparation. We just try to rest, right? And focus on Yah and focus on each other, right? And take that time aside to enjoy the Shabbat. That's typically what we do. All right. So let me go ahead and how biblical is the lunar Sabbath? The lunar Sabbath is not biblical at all. I said it, and I stand by it. All right. Got throw my headphones on for this. These headphones actually are glowing. So, Shalom. Who's it? Sean? Can you hear me, Sean? Oh, you dropped off. Okay. With with 13 moms being between 2024 and now, how do you calculate that in with this coming feast day calculation? You said 13 moons. I think that's what you meant to say. Okay. So check this. The priestly reckoning of time is superimposed onto the civil reckoning of time, which means the priest cared nothing about 12 months. The priest cared nothing about 13 months, unless you're a Babylonian Chaldean priest. The priests only call in and announce when Aviv starts, and call in and announce when that final 8th day of Tabernacles hits. Once that's done, all the feast days are concluded by the 8th moon of Bull. That's it. There's only 8 months of reckoning time for the priestly calculation of time necessary to align with the feast days. They officiate that. They only care about those 8 months. They care nothing about the civil calendar. The only time the civil calendar is reckoned is if it's out of line, which we don't have no examples of that. If it's out of line with the priestly reckoning of time, because the priestly model for reckoning time has its foundation onto the civil calendar, which has its foundation onto the almanac of the Iron Age period in Canaan. Okay? So the priestly calendar has nothing to do with anything, has no existence if the foundation is not there. And that foundation is being that 12-month calendrical system, as we see by the Gezer calendar. And the Gezer calendar was there in a city in which Israel occupied during the Iron Age period before they went into captivity. It was not 13 months, there's 12 months on the Gezer calendar. And that corroborates in regards to the months for reaping and sowing and what you're reaping and sowing. It corroborates what we see in Torah as it pertains to Aviv and the calendrical dates necessary to perform the feast days, as we see in Leviticus chapter 23 and Deuteronomy chapter 16. All right. Yeah, no problem. No problem. Right. So that's why I said, so it only reckons with 8 months. When you only have 8 months, you get to call when it begins and when it ends. After all those feast days are done, the priests don't care nothing about that. They care nothing about reckoning time after that. They wait until the following year, following spring season. They'll call it again. This is the beginning of Aviv, and they're calling when it closes out at the beginning of Bull. So as long as you finish everything by that 8th moon, you're done. Now, what has happened is over time, the keeping of additional months by the priestly clash, because that kind of changed a lot in captivity, that changed when the Feast of Dedication came on the scene. The Feast of Dedication is not in Torah. The Feast of Dedication occurred based on an incident that happened. During that time period, now the priest started reckoning more months. And then you have Purim. Again, all these things happen while we are in captivity, where now these are now, for some people, feast days. They include them as feast days. But that's not in Torah. So if I keep any of those feasts, it's by option. I may choose to, may not choose to. It's not mandatory. All right. Yes, that's correct. Vaya. That's correct. All right. Do you have a book on the calendar of the Hebrews that only deals with the Old Testament text? Also, which phase of the moon does Josephus reckon as starting Rosh Chodesh and the Passover? Josephus is going to go with the calendar of the day. He's not going to deal with the ancient Pre-Exilic Israelite calendar. He's not going to go with that. So what he does help establish, him following others, is that the year begins after the equinox. But in regards to Josephus's perspective does not reflect the ancient Pre-Exilic Israelite calendar. So it's going to reflect the calendar of his time. So, and again, if you go by Jubilees are going to situate a totally different calendar than Josephus. And the book of Jubilees actually predates Josephus. So which one do we go to? Do we go to the book of Jubilees and Enoch, or do we leverage and lean on Josephus, who's going to be in and around Jerusalem? Now you have a clash. I say throw it all out, because the calendar that I'm dealing with is when there were no sects in Israel. That's how we got to reckon it if we're going to really deal with relative dating of time. Okay. All right, let me bring my guest on. Let me throw this back on. This went off. Make sure I can hear. I think you're muted, Sean.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. What's going on, King? Long time no speak, man. Congratulations,
Wow.
first and foremost.
Hey, bro. I appreciate it, man. It's been a long time, man. But trust me, man. Still have you on my thoughts, bro. I'll sneak in the background and still check you out.
Yeah,
Just life, man. Life be life. You know what I'm
it
saying?
do, man. Hey, when
But
you get a chance, you can also give me a call. We could talk also offline as well
bet,
to kind of
yeah,
catch
for
up.
sure, man.
All
And
right.
definitely congrats, man. I know you'd had a couple of new additions as well. I don't think I'm gonna catch you, dog. I think you got me, man. I think
Nah, it's okay. I'm not going any more than what I'm batting. I'm good for now. I'm retired. I hung up my jersey. Right. I'm gonna leave
yeah,
that to
I
the
hear
young
you.
to the young crowd. They can have all
Uh,
those additional kids, man. But yeah, it's all good, King.
I hear you.
So yeah, so you want to give some feedback input in regards to the calendar. You got it, brother.
Yeah, yeah, dog. So yeah, bro. So like, of course, I've been rocking with your information for a long time, and we've been keeping the Pre-Exilic Calendar basically since you laid it out or whatever. And of course, everything I looked at, everything that you provided, I agree. Like that is for sure, I believe, to be the calendar of the land of what would have been going on. Like you said during Pre-Exilic times. I think like over like the past year or two, I've been like studying like Second Temple Judaism like pretty thorough, just trying to like just get a feel of like the world of Yeshua and all that. And looking at it, I'm like, dang, um, it looked like this is not the calendar. I believe you said this before. I'm sure I've asked you that question before. Like, no, he wouldn't have been following the pre-exilic calendar, right? But it seemed like to me he was everything I've seen looked like he was following like the first crescent, which would have been from like Babylon. So, and I think Hakodesh asked this question or whatever. Like, I think my conviction has been like, dang, do I just because he is the Messiah and we look to him as our guide, do we follow that instead, especially with being in the diaspora now? Though I agree that the calendar that you have is the calendar that would have been in the land prior to any captivities. You know what I'm saying? So I think it was more like a conviction, like, dang, do I switch back over to this calendar that he was following? Because like it seemed like he would have had an issue with it if it were wrong. You know what I'm saying? Just given his status, who he was. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah. So
And
I
that may be
think
like a little religious or a little, I don't know what you want to call it, more of a theological conversation or whatever. But I'm just telling you my conviction. I'm just trying to be transparent with you. You know what I mean?
yeah, you good. And again, these questions help others that may have the same questions, but they may not be asking it, right? So I think when we think about Yeshua as a Messiah, we center everything around him. And I think the problem with that is he never came out with a treatise to explain reckoning of time. He never told his disciples, all right, let me tell you how to reckon time, right?
Mm.
And kind of pull them aside and give them a parable or give them a lesson. He never did that. What he's doing is he's appealing to the Jews of the first century CE. A lot of the things that he speaks on are things that are only pertinent to that time in history, but does not refer to times in the past. Sometimes he may quote from scripture in the past that dealt with a particular time that's distant from him, but a lot of the things he was dealing with dealt with that period of time. For example, when he's talking to Peter about the temple tax, what temple tax is that? Temple tax was added when they were in captivity. Temple tax did not exist prior to that. You had tithes, and sometimes you had atonement monies and other types of funds that are given, but it's not called a temple tax. There's no taxing of your own people. So he's dealing with a situation, again, that is based on the immediate time in which he is dealing with. He told Peter, who's free? It's the sons that are treated this way, it's the servants that are treated this way. Peter answers it, and he says, okay, I want you to throw a line into the water, catch a fish. You're going to have 2 drachma in his mouth. Use that to pay the temple tax. That has nothing to do with the time of Moses. Has nothing to do with the time of Jacob, even has nothing to do with the time of David or David, because the temple tax did not exist at that time. We have nowhere where he has given us a treatise to lay out the calendrical system and say, this is what you should follow as it pertains to the feast days. He doesn't say that. So the assumption is that he is adopting what is already present at that time, and then he is going from there to use that information to go and meet with the apostles. Now, the purpose of Passover and unleavened bread that was kept at that time was based off of the calendrical model that they were using at that time. The calendrical model they're using at that time, we know for certain that it does not go back to pre-exilic times, because it, number one, adopts the names of Babylonian captivity. Why would they need to maintain the names of Babylon if their calendrical system pre-existed Babylon. The fact that it shares those names that comes from Babylon, and we see all of this in the post-exilic text, is because it is modeled after that. That is where the influence comes from, right? So he's using what was there at that time. He never made any treatise to say, look, what they're doing in Qumran is wrong. Don't keep that calendar. But the Pharisees are doing it, don't keep their calendar. The Hillel II calendar that Jews currently use, that didn't exist during the time of Yeshua. He created a calculation to maintain the reckoning of time that they had, which has some differences in the 4th century than what we have in the 1st century, right? And this is what the Jewish community follows today. So it's not even 100% in alignment with what he was keeping in the 1st century CE. So now we have these various variations. That's why I showed the book that goes into the history of 1,200 years of how the calendar morphs over time, picks up things here, picks up something here, drops this off here. But we're going back prior to all of this. And we're trying to restore ourselves back to that pre-exilic period, because that pre-exilic period is what Yah spoke and dictated for the Israelites to deal with. Now, over time, because of our captivities, that's a result of our disobedience. So therefore, there's going to be divisions, different sects. There's going to be exiles. That's why we don't have a unified calendar today, because of captivity and because we were sent into exile. So again, and I say this again, there's Midrash commentary that speaks behind both the current calendar that's used by the Jewish community and by the calendar that's used amongst Qumran. What we get today goes back to what was being used in the 1st century CE, but now you have a division. You have Qumran and Jerusalem, and they both have 2 different competing calendars. That's a result of captivity. When Yeshua did his ministry, he was not in Qumran. He was not amongst the Yahad community. So forget anybody's telling you that. There's some people that say, oh yeah, he was there and they follow after. He was not amongst that community, because if he was, and that's who he was called to go to, trust me, he would not be dealing with the calendar that was in Jerusalem, right? So we try to go back before the schism, before the division, before captivity, and try to reconstruct what's there that'll bring us closest to the original decreed calendrical model that was given by the Most High Yah to Moshe. But again, I have no debate when I say that Yeshua was keeping Passover based on what was being done at that time. I'm not saying nothing's wrong with that, because if they decided to keep that at that time, so that way it's the time when all the Jews are coming. So I'm going to say this. When Yeshua was crucified, that's a predetermined plan. At that plan is predetermined. Yah's going to use the medium of what's going on in society to bring about his will, whether or not it's something that he sanctioned initially or not. He's willing to deal with the people in their current condition. So the purpose of that is those Jews that came from all around the world for Passover and unleavened bread had to be there to have a huge enough crowd to say, crucify him, do away with him, right? Because if it was a different date, 2 weeks before that, 2 weeks after that, that crowd wouldn't be there, because Passover unleavened bread would already be gone. So if they're using the calendrical model that they had at that time in order for the Jews to come in for Passover, and that's the same week in which he's crucified, then my position is that Yah used that as a means to bring about the crucifixion of Yeshua, his death, burial, resurrection, and the movement of the Messianism movement that comes from out of that. So I have no argument that Passover is what that Passover was. I have no issue with that. And again, I can't debate that, because from what I see, according to the evidence, that's exactly what they were using at that time, right? And again, they also based this on the civil calendar of the day, and that was the Julian calendar, right? When the Israelites were not in captivity, they wasn't superimposing anything on anything. They were simply using nature, both the terrestrial and celestial signs, in order to determine when the feast days begin. They cared nothing about a calendar, about a mathematical equation that you get to try to avoid certain days from falling on the Sabbath and so forth. That's not prescribed anywhere in Scripture. The 13-month intercalation is not prescribed anywhere in Torah. I always ask people that follow that, where is that in Torah? Book, chapter, verse that says, in the event that you are behind in the seasons after 12 months based on the moon, this is what you do to get a 13th month. That's nowhere in scripture. So if a calendar is being followed that has a 13th month because of a 13th moon, they would have to show me what are the accommodations that's prescribed in the Torah for that type of situation. If it's not mentioned, then they would have to prove that that is the intended calendar that comes based on what Moshe is given in the Torah. And that is one of the difficulties we face is intercalation. You have to use that both with the Enochian model and with the Second Temple Judaistic model. You have to use intercalation, right? Because that's just the way it is. And again, if we don't see that in Torah, whoever follows that will have to account for why that's the case. Why is that not prescribed on how to reckon the 13th month if we fall out of the seasons with our calendrical system or our reckoning of time, right? So that's to give you some clues. What I will recommend in regards to what you're saying, again, I don't disagree with what you're saying, is that book that I shared. I think you read it before. I'm sure you read it before, the one that I shared, but I'm gonna show it again for anybody else who may not have read it. This one right here, Calendrical Variations in Second Temple Judaism, New Perspectives on the Date of the Last Supper. So what they do is they peruse through all the calendrical models that are being used and say, okay, which one is in current usage in which the Last Supper, which you call, that was technically Passover, right? The Last Supper in which Yeshua kept that with the disciples, which calendrical model aligns with that? You want to say something, brother? Oh, I can't hear you.
My bad.
Oh, there you go. Yep.
I'm looking back and forth. I'm watching the baby.
Oh, you
But
good?
what I was going to say, yeah, look, again, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying or whatever. You know what I mean? Just more about clarity.
Oh yeah,
But
definitely.
in regards to the Passover thing, right? Because that used to trip me up too. Like, oh, dog, it seems like it's Passover's going on at two different times. This Last Supper. I think within the last year, I've come to understand that to be it was this thing within the Galilean tradition called the fast of the firstborn. So it's not necessarily the way that this was laid out was like this is not necessarily like two Passovers going on. This is more so the Last Supper is dealing with the fast of the firstborn, and then that fast goes into Passover. That was the way it was laid out. So I've seen this in a couple of articles. Yeah, I'm not, listen.
It's
I
mentioned
read a
in
lot
here
of stuff.
too. Yeah, it's mentioned in here too.
Okay, cool. So they go into that, but again, it could, this book right here could probably have more details on it too, connected all the way to Passover. But like within the last year, I did see this or whatever. And then of course, I think like it's even laid out like in like within like the Talmud. I think they kind of deal with it as well. But like I said, there was a couple of other articles that this laid out. So that's kind of how I started to see it. Like, okay, this ain't necessarily two Passovers or two calendars going on, but they still would have been like a divide with the calendar based upon what is that? The Omar count? The Omer count?
Yeah.
I think that would have been going on during that day. But I think the temple calendar, like I said, I think it was still used. I think that was still the first crescent, if I'm not mistaken. And like I said, all of this to me came down to like conviction. Like, dang, yo, should I be following what he was doing, especially if he wasn't condemning? And if he ain't condemning it, should we all be following that? Now I get it. We are all in the diaspora, trying to figure out a way to lock arms. You know what I'm saying? Like, I completely get it. But like I said, just looking at the text and just like looking at my own walk, individually and stuff like that, I'm just like, man, am I doing this wrong? But I cannot deny any of the evidence that you laying forth. Like I told you, I believe 1,000%. The calendar that you know what I'm saying that I've been using the last several years that you put me on to, I ain't got no doubt in my mind, bro, that is what it was prior to any captivity.
Correct. And again, it comes down to whether or not the calendar that was in use during Yeshua's day, which he did not condemn, is that what we should be following today, right? And that's a good argument for those who make that. If they center everything around that, I have no qualms with that, right? The only thing that we attempted to do is to reconstruct what Israel would have been using prior to the captivity, right?
No doubt.
And again, one of the things that I mentioned, even the first one that you mentioned, the question would be, where's those prescriptions in Torah, right? That would be the ask, right? Like if you had to point to a Bible chapter verse where would you go to say, oh, this right here is speaking about the fast, the firstborn?
Oh no. I just think it was a tradition. Like that's why I said I think it was a tradition of the tradition of the Galileans, almost similar to like the whole argument, like the whole works of the law. Like look into the works of the law, then you kind of see what that is. You kind of go into like Qumran or whatever. I know you know this. You go into Qumran, and that's like the only place you really find out what the works of the law was. And they had like this whole layout of what the works of the law was and all that kind of stuff. So of course, I think you find a lot of tradition that's in the New Testament, a lot of tradition that was going on in the Second Temple period, especially when you prior to the New Testament, you go into like Nehemiah and Ezra and all this type of stuff, and they start adding stuff in there, and all the stuff started to develop or whatever. I don't got no doubt about that for sure. And I'm not saying that the fast of the firstborn should be a commandment. I don't think it had anything to do with the Torah, like at all. It's just tradition.
Yeah, something that came up over time. Yeah,
for sure. You know what I'm saying?
And the fact that they had a meal on that during that time. I mean, could that be him saying, okay, this is proper to do, but remember, because he didn't really lay out a teaching precisely saying this is the appropriate way to keep the calendar. This is the appropriate way to do the Passover. Sure. He never gave any explicit details or instruction on that, right? He just went along with what was currently going on. And my only explanation for that is that Yah used that situation to bring about what occurred with him and what would happen or transpire afterwards. So
no look, bro. Yeah. I get it. He didn't do that. No, he didn't do that. He didn't speak on it all. Like I said, I don't see that there. Yeah, like I said, man, I don't have no issue with nobody else. And plus, on top of that, bro, I notice when somebody says like we not in the land, they kind of utilize it to say we shouldn't do feasts. I'm not saying it for that reason. I'm just simply saying because we are in the diaspora, you're going to have a variance of calendars.
And for people that do say that, there's proof that the Jews were keeping it outside.
For sure. What was it? The
Book of Tobit. And then you have the Book of Tobit that speaks about a feast being kept outside the land. And then you also have the Passover letter that we get from Elephantine Island. Yeah, those are two, but there's a third one too. We found a scroll in a synagogue in
is that Elephantine?
Turkey? No, not Elephantine. In Turkey, that also mentioned the keeping of feasts outside the land, right? So we have archives from the Marushu tablets. And then we also have the Elephantine Papyrus for the Passover letter. We have the mention in the Book of Tobit, and we have the discovery from that synagogue. So we have 4 references where they're keeping the feast days outside the land, and nobody is saying they're going to make an aliyah, they're going to make a trip or a hajj to the land to keep it. So that leaves scholars to believe that this happened post-exilic, where we get a redaction of the text that is now given an instruction to keep the feast days at a particular place at a particular time for the sake of unity because of the diaspora, right? So a lot of these things develop over time. These are things that I look at doing criticism and so forth, but I don't use it to the point where I'm religiously dogmatic about it, that I'm going to oppose anybody that would reject that. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, no doubt, man. Well, look, bro, I don't want to take up the rest of your time, man.
Good,
it was a pleasure talking to you, man. Like, it's been a minute. I'm gonna take you up on your offer to hit you up, man. Would love to just catch up personally, man. But big love for you, bro. Like I said, a lot of my studies is built on your foundation. I always tell people, like, I always give you a major shout out, like, hey, listen, I rock with Divine. I listen to a lot of this information, man. You got me to where I am. Like, even me having these questions is based upon the foundation that you've given me or whatnot, man. So big love,
more praise to the Most High, brother. I'm just passing along what was given to me. Freely I receive, so freely I give. You know what I'm saying? So
no doubt, man.
To you, King. So so go ahead and do your thing, brother. You can come on here anytime, but give me a call offline and let's catch up. All right?
Sure. Salute, my boy.
All right, King. Shalom. That's my brother from another mother right there, man. Some people that in the walk that you may not speak to them for like a year or two, but you get on the phone, it's like never skip the beat. That's my brother right there. All right. So let me drop this. Let me drop the link here again. We got a few more minutes. So I'm gonna put this here. Actually, I can start wrapping up soon, I think. Let me see what time. Oh, it's almost 7 o'clock. Yeah, we gotta begin to wrap up. We got a few more minutes. So If there's another question, let me see what else is in here. FVC stands for First Visible Crescent. All right. Of course. That's why I put the link out in case somebody wanted to come on and ask something that others were maybe too shy to ask or could not articulate themselves, right? Lee Ennis said, doesn't matter if it's a solar or lunar calendar, there'll be problems. Lee Ennis, what do you mean there'll be problems? He said a lunar calendar makes the most sense, in my opinion. No problem, brother. You're entitled to that opinion. I disagree respectfully. But again, if you have any additional feedback you'd like to share, you can drop it in the chat, or if you want to jump on and voice it real quick, you can before I sign off. So just let me know. So that in a nutshell, right? I'm going to lay out for you real quick how we reckon time based on the research that I've done to reconstruct the calendrical model. So the 6 terrestrial signs, right? Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 and 18, it dictates that we are to use the sun, moon, and stars in order to tell days. Let's get it real quick. Let's get it. Let's go to Genesis chapter 1. Let me share it on the screen. Okay, Genesis chapter 1. And it says, and Yah said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for moedim and for days and years. So they're there for signs, like we get the blood moon or the moon are turning black because of a wow, how I forget it, man. I must be tired, man. Long day. Because of a eclipse. So at that time, they'll say it's a dark moon. The moon had become dark unnecessarily. That's a sign. When the moon turns red, that's a sign, right? But then you had the moedim, that these lights, plural, are there to indicate the moedim. When we go to Psalm 104, chapter 104, verse 19, the moon was made for the seasons. You have to reckon the moon as well. But the lights were there, plural. The lights, it says verse 15, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give a light upon the earth. And it was so. Verse 16, and Yah made the 2 great lights. The moon is great when it's full, not when it's a sliver, not when it's a conjunction moon. And it's interesting because the book of Enoch actually has something to say in regards to that. Very interestingly. The greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. All of these are the lights. All of these are the lights. So you have to have a luni-solar stellar calendar. You have to count the moon. Well, I really said the sun first. The sun, the moon, and the stars. So it's going to be a solar, luni-stellar calendar. All 3 lights have to be used. We reckon the full moon, because the full moon is the great light for a sign and for the moedim, to usher in the moedim. And it's used for days and years. So the calculation of time that we reckon is based on the 3 celestial signs, the sun, the moon, and the stars. Then we get what we call the terrestrial signs, which are the seasons in regards to the harvest. And we get that harvest going into Exodus chapter 9, and then the Aviv harvest in Exodus chapter 13. And then we see what you have to give. If we go to Leviticus chapter 23, it tells you what you have to give when you have these feasts. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land that I give you and reap its harvest, you shall bring the sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest, and he shall wave the sheaf before Yah so that you may be accepted. On the day after the Shabbat, the priest shall wave it. And on the day when you wave the sheaf, you shall offer a male lamb a year old without blemish as a burnt offering to Yah. And the grain offering with it shall be 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil, a food offering to Yah with a pleasing aroma, and the drink offering with it shall be of wine, 1/4 of a hin. This is what the text is saying. You cannot have a feast day without grain or cereal grains to offer. That's scripture. So that's the harvest. Now we got to deal with the weather and animal migrations. Song of Solomon, chapter 2. Let's jump on down. Verse 10. My beloved speaks and says to me, again, this is during the pre-exilic time, arise, my love, my beautiful one, and come away. For behold, the winter is past. How we know it's past? The rain is over and gone. In Israel, the wintry rainy season ends in March. So when you have your first day of the year after the equinox, you have to make sure that the wintry rains have passed. Then she says, the flowers appear on the earth, the time of singing has come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in the land. When do the turtle dove migrate into the land? They leave the land before those wintry rains come, and they enter the land after the wintry rains are gone. If you don't see the turtle dove migration into the land, it's not time for you to start your feast days yet. You understand? It can't be wintry rain in the land and you go and you reap. They don't do that when it rains. They sow when it rains and they reap after the rains. So if it's still the rainy season in Israel and you having your feast days, something is off. So the animal migration are the turtle doves. You see that? The turtle doves. That's it. Now, I'll show you something else. And we're going to get, let me see if I get it for you. Let me see if I can find it for you. You know what? Let me do this. Let me go to, so this here is the wintry rains has passed and the flowers appearing in the earth. They begin budding and the time of singing has come and the voice of turtle doves is heard in the land. All using the environment to reckon time. Okay. Jumping from there, let's transition. Let's go to Job. Let's go to Job. Do a one. Job 38. Yeah. So Job chapter 38, verse 31. Can you bind the chains of Pleiades or loose the cords of Orion? Watch this. Verse 32. Can you lead forth the Mazaroth in their season, or can you guide the bear with its children? Do you know the ordinances of the heavens? Can you establish their rule on the earth? Pleiades, Horizon, the Bear, these are all star constellations that occur in a particular season in the northern hemisphere. Mazaroth, this literally means a crown or a garland of lights, which is used to represent the celestial lights of what we call the stars. This is showing how the stellar system can be used to reckon time or season, as we see in Job 38 and 32. This is very important. Let's go to Psalm 104 and 19. And it says, he made the moon to mark the seasons. You need the moon in order to know this right here. You see that little A there? Or the appointed times, your moedim. The moon is there for that, to mark it. Can't exempt the moon. Now, also in here, we have nothing that refers to the first visible crescent. The word for crescent is there in the Hebrew, Saharon. It exists, but it's not used in regards to the moon phase that would be used to reckon the feast days. It's actually used to represent the crescent ornaments that will be utilized by the Israelites when they're adopting Babylonian and or Mesopotamian culture, right? We see that, right? So the wintry rains is the weather. The turtle dove is the migrations. And the harvest that we saw, what did we see about? The barley, the spelt, the wheat, and the flax. We learned about all those crops. And we know that if it was a hailstorm and it's destroying some of those stalks, and it's the barley stalk that's being destroyed, we know that you're on the precipice of the early wheat harvest that would then lead you into what we will call the feast of unleavened bread. So you have to give something, and if you're unable to give something, if the winter rains are there and you cannot harvest naturally in the land in the ancient Israelite period of time, guess what? Your feast day is too early. You're doing it wrong. Thank you, Randall, for the donation, but I appreciate that. Unknown L, I can't address that right now, brother. But I got you, brother. I got you. I actually did a live where I discussed that. That was a question that came up. I addressed that. I dealt with the book of Corinthians, and I went into the history, and I used the logo software to give you some sources. So I'll have to do that for a regular Freestyle Friday for you, brother. All right, you can access. Here we're just focusing on the feast days and the calendrical model. Now the question would be, well, Divine, where are you getting the full moon? I just mentioned the great light. That's used for the sign season. Well, Divine, there's a full moon when you performing the feast days, they would say. Then I said, look, then we have to discuss Psalm 81 and 3 and find out what we're talking about here in Psalm 81 and 3. Is Psalm 81 and 3 referring to a full moon that brings in the month, or some of the full moon that lands on the feast day? Like, you know, when you have a first visible crescent or conjunction moon, 14 and 15 days afterwards for Passover and unleavened bread, and for tabernacles, you would get a full moon, and a full moon was assigned to bring in that feast. Some would say. I say the opposite. The full moon's there to bring in the beginning of the month. If you want to look at one of the many old sects that had this perspective, look at the Megarians. I bring this up every time I teach on this subject matter. The Megarians was a sect that could be traced all the way back to the 1st century CE that kept the full moon that brings in a year and brings in every month afterwards. All right. So again, I have no problem continue to add to this over time. I've done a whole lecture on this for y'all, right? 7 hours and some change where I actually delineate all these details and itemize them out and give you the sources and so forth. If you're interested in that, go back to my playlist where I talk about the feast days. I have other videos in there as well. But you'll get more detail if you need more detail based on what I'm saying. If you need the sources for what I'm saying, I showed them all to you earlier in this session, and you can get them on the Patreon, www.patreon.com/DivineProspect. All right. So unfortunately, I do have to close out now. I'm going to thank everybody for coming on today and being a part of this session. I'm sorry that the brother Akpalau could not make it for whatever reason. I'm sorry that the other two guests, Caleb and the others, were unable to show up and have this discussion or other discussions in which I've mentioned in the past. But this was meant to do because some of y'all still have questions in regards to the feast days. I want to make sure that we're able to satisfy that appetite of knowledge and answer that question so you can walk uprightly with your Creator and keep His commandments as He's prescribed in the Torah to His servant Moshe. All right. So all praise to the Most High Yah. Thank you all my VIPs for joining us. I see a couple of new people. I'm going to give you a quick shout out before I bounce. Shout out to Lee Ennis EA. Shout out to Randall Hall II. Grow, Glow, No. Unknown L. My brother Yedidiah. Israelite Defense. Let me see. Hana. Ada. Let me see. Who else is there? I think that's everybody. Yeah, I think that's everybody. Judah, Israel. Yeah, I got you already. All right, so I covered everybody. So I appreciate your time. Again, we will go live again next Friday, but I may go live during the week or the weekend. I don't know. It depends on what my schedule looks like for y'all again. If you have additional questions you want to ask, if anybody's interested in getting one of these, y'all seeing this, you're interested in getting one of these, you should be able to see it in the description below, or you can go to a previous video from last year, and in the description we have the link to get you one of these silver scrolls. All right, these are one of the heirlooms that we use in the community as a means of a talisman to ward off negative energy, evil spirits. We're going to do something that's based on the Pre-Exilic Israelite culture. Then you got to get one of these, a silver scroll. All right, because that's our culture. All right. All right. So if you're interested in that Israelite defense, again, I'm going to share this one link with you, and then I got to close out. So let me get this for you real quick. I'm going to go to my playlist, and I'm going to try to get this last one for you. Unless one of the admins can grab it before me, I'm going to go to the playlist where, let's see, where's my playlist? Right here. I'm going to go to the playlist where you can get that information from. Where's it at? Where's it at? Where's it at? And then I'm close. There it is. Here it is. Nope. All right. So let me share this link with you. Let me close that out. All right. Here it is right here. What about the thing for the floor? Are you talking about a prayer mat? I'm not sure what you mean by that, my brother. Let me know, unknown L. All right. All right. Thank you as well. Again, Shabbat Shalom to those of you, the commandment keepers that are keeping the Shabbat at this time. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for joining in and giving your contributions via the chat. Thank you to my brother Shor McGee for joining the show and giving his feedback. Again, we can understand the truth together. This is not a one-man show. I am only strengthened when I receive the feedback and criticism that you share in the chat that helps me grow. And all I'm doing is cycling that back to you. All right. So thank you all for joining us. I appreciate it. All praise to the Most High. If you want to donate to the ministry, all the information is in the description below. And if there's anything that we can do to give back to you, make sure you email us at kingdomharbinger@gmail.com. And we got you. All right. I'm going to keep you all in prayer. Keep me in prayer as well. I pray the Ruach will dwell with all of you in your households, over you and your family, as you enjoy the set apart Shabbat that we're partaking in with Yah, because it's his day. And that we continue to keep his commandments, reflect on him and his will, the goodness of him. How good is the taste, the goodness of Yah. And once you have a taste of it, man, there's nothing else that can satisfy you after that. Right? All praise to the Most High, man. Love you, family. Thank you for watching. Peace and shalom.